Dear trading friends, today I have an incredibly exciting video prepared for you. We're going to go through a possible bottom formation that I have just newly analyzed. Well, not entirely new. I already talked a bit about it in the last video, but here I have included steps 1, 2, and 3 of the bottom formation phase from the previous bear market. And now I want to compare that with the current bear market. This doesn't mean, or it doesn't imply, that things have to play out exactly the same way. I'm not a fan of analysis just because everything happened exactly the same way in the past. Because as you know, no bull market cycle has ever been exactly like the previous one, and we can see that in the current bull market as well. And why exactly this level here is the big difference, something we didn't have in the last bull market, or rather, why it's not interesting for the bear market, I want to go through that with you as well. Not only that, I've looked into the liquidations. I got the heatmap premium package from Coinglass. Looking at a 2-year overview, we can see this large liquidation in this price range, which still lies ahead of us. And that's exactly what I've marked here. 8 billion, which are right here in this area. Accordingly, I'll also show you my assessment if we reach that, how we could reach it, and how we might then get a reversal pattern here. Not only that, I've prepared something else for you. I've got a few treats from the 2-year heat map of the altcoins. You had a few requests, I analyzed your requested coins, but not only that, I also brought in a few others. I've really discovered some extremely awesome opportunities here for myself. We can see it here, we can also see it here. Just look at this. When something shines so brightly and is so interesting, I really notice it here. The one time in a lifetime opportunity where I say, here you have the chance, or here as well, to buy coins or to build long positions. In this case, if you want to play it safe and are looking at the market long term, such liquidations are of course extremely interesting for spot purchases. I've also prepared an incredible number of others for you, but we'll go through those at the end of the video. But why, for example, did I place a spot buy limit order at 57,980, 0.5 bitcoins on PIONEX, but also 0.5 bitcoins on Bitget, specifically as a spot buy limit order? I want to go through that with you. I also have another 10. I'm buying Ethereum at $1,500 because institutions have placed their orders there and there's a huge liquidation cluster. I already showed you that in the last video, the liquidation cluster and the institutional orders. You're welcome to go through that again in the live stream. If you're not yet on these exchanges, PIONEX, Bitunix, or Bitget, check the link in the video description. In some cases, you have the option to sign up without KYC, secure a bonus, and then trade without risk. Otherwise, feel free to subscribe to my channel. Thank you as well for your support for the last videos and for your positive feedback. Guys, it really motivates me to keep making such detailed analyses. So, of course, please also leave a like on this video and a comment. But now let's continue with Bitcoin. First, let's take a look at this initial analysis I mentioned. Step 1, 2, and 3. Why this could be very interesting and why this is the decisive factor here, specifically this area which we didn't have in the last bear market. And why this could be our support here. Because many are expecting $40,000. Peter Schiff even said $28,000 without any real justification. Numbers are basically just being pulled out of nowhere. I also understand the $40,000 because in every bear market we have at least reached the 0.786 Fibonacci range. Of course, that could also be possible here. We have also reached it again in the past, Fibonacci trading, and you know the strategy from my videos in the playlist, Trading Learner, step by step to becoming a pro trader. But those were simply the bear market bottoms that we had here. We must not forget one thing. In the past, we never had as much institutional liquidity in the market as we do at the current time. And this is going to get very interesting here, especially when we compare it to the previous bull or bear market, because we have simply never been identical before. And I think this is going to be an incredibly exciting zone now. Let's take a quick look at the whale orders and large trades. Here we see the institutions and the whales in the price range from 58,000 down to 55,000, almost 56,000 US dollars. They have already placed huge amounts of orders. So they are prepared in case we go down, so that spot purchases and long positions can be entered here. But we also see activity here between 64,000 and 63,000 US dollars, again a massive order volume. Despite everything, of course, we want to stay focused, because at the moment it looks more like we will see much lower prices. How could things continue from here? That's what I want to show you. Step 1. And I'm not really a fan of this. I told you I'm not a fan because we've seen a completely different bull market this time. We had that with one correction, a second correction, and a third smaller correction up here again before we actually saw the bottom. And here there was exactly one small correction, new all-time high. But what's really interesting here now, that's what I want to show you. So I'll zoom in a bit so we can take a closer look at this here, because it's not just about what the chart did in the past. It went up again, and then continued to fall. No, of course we have to include technical analysis. And that's what I want to show you. Because we fell down and built up massive order volume here. I'll draw that in like this now. Then we had an upswing, right? To a new all-time high. And then we corrected first exactly into this order volume. Let's remember box 1 now. We went into it, found support there, briefly moved up before we then fell down. And now let's look at another example, box 2, which could be very interesting right now. If I take all of this and expand it a bit, you'll see what I mean in a moment. Then we currently see something similar. But what do I mean by something similar? It's actually 1-to-1. Shifted over even if we were a bit higher. But we had the last all-time high here, consolidated and then moved up. Then down exactly, and that's what I mean now. We can't just draw a box or something and say, yeah, the market does the same thing every time. And no, of course, it had to do with the order volume here, which caused us to drop down. Then inside this white box, we briefly had an upswing before we broke below it. Look back again. We have exactly the same pattern. But here, it's only because we have this order volume right here, and these interesting price areas where a lot of trading took place. And right now, we see exactly the same thing. After we had the upswing, we broke down through it and entered zone 2. Zone 2 in this case isn't just made up. I'd also like to show something about that. In this case, that was down here. Zone 2, a strong sell-off once again. Once again, everything was liquidated that could be. And now we're in a small consolidation phase. Weekly chart, you can see it here. At the moment, we're really seeing something very similar. If we look closer, a sell-off candle, 2 weeks. We consolidated a bit downward, then had a brief recovery. And after that, it continued to go down. And what do we see here at this point in time? We have a strong sell-off candle into this zone. I'll get back to this zone in a moment and explain why it's so interesting here. What I said at the beginning of the video, if you were paying attention, that's super exciting. Now 2 weeks of consolidation, and it might even last a bit longer. But we also see, if we include this here, who remembers the video? I shared this with you right here. Bitcoin bottom confirmed. Take a look at that. If you want to know how this indicator works, which has always perfectly signaled the Bitcoin bottom so far, if you know how to use it, of course. So super interesting. That would of course also be interesting now because we only have the first green candle and it's only after the second one closes that the accumulation phase begins with larger drawdowns. But now we are in zone 2. And why is zone 2 much more interesting here now than it was in the past? Because what did we have here? We are in zone 2 and what happened was we dipped downwards. But actually, if we look closely, this consolidation phase didn't have any volume, so no strong order volume in the past where we could say, okay, that's why we're stopping exactly here now. There were a few liquidity candles here, so-called liquidity hunts, as you can see here, but, and this is what's interesting, we have this now in this area for the very first time. I'll turn this off again now, and that brings us to this zone that I showed at the beginning of the video. Exactly this zone, and in the last videos I showed you this with the VPBR, the point of control, which has been the most traded volume in this bull run. And of course that's what's exciting right now. A point of control is a super interesting zone because it's a price range where buyers and sellers usually agree on the price, but that doesn't mean we'll stop exactly here. But we are now in zone 3. What do I mean by zone 3? In past bear markets, and if we look at this no matter how far back we go, we have normally never, and I'm even going back to 2013 here, never really dipped 50 or 60% into the previous bull market. We must not forget that. Rather, we actually formed our bottom around the previous bull market top. And accordingly, this is also super interesting when we look into it here. Here too, we had the same situation. It was the bull market top, then we experienced the bear market and then rose again. And where was our bottom here? Directly again in the first part of the previous bull market where we also found the bottom formation. In this case, however, it would actually be this price range. That was our previous cycle top. I've now roughly marked it here where we are, and that would be now. Box 3, just as we have it here. Box 3, possibility of a bottom formation. And that's exactly what I see here as a possibility as well. This strong possibility here. Not only that, we also have the 0.618 here. Fibonacci at around 57,900 US dollars. I told you we already have institutions that have positioned themselves here in these orders. But we also must not forget when looking at the liquidation heat map, we have further down, and it's not a small amount, down to 50,000 to 47,000 US dollars, the 8 billion in liquidity. For me, of course, there's now the possibility that we say, okay, we continue with box 2, just like it was in the past, a new leg down, which would be super interesting. The 0.618 Fibonacci level will definitely be interesting because the 200 SMA also comes into play here. And it's precisely this phase here that could lead to a new consolidation. And to be honest, since we are consolidating so strongly here, I strongly suspect that we could also see a consolidation in this price range, as we did before, over a longer period of time. And if everything really goes badly and we get one last leg down, maybe, and right now, all we can say about these 8 billion is that if we drop down here and pick up this liquidity, that could be our bottom formation. This liquidity is nothing other than all the long positions that came in here after this correction. Is there a possibility that we could still come down here? Of course, unfortunately, we can't see any deeper into the liquidation heat map than the 43,000 US dollars, but at the current moment, there are 277 million at 43,700 US dollars. But that doesn't mean there isn't quite a bit more below that, where we could say, okay, this is the area here. If we still have a lot lying at the 0.786 level, then of course we could see lower prices. Of course, we have to use the data we have now to our advantage. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Accordingly, this could be the opportunity. I've already prepared something here, a long consolidation in this phase, which we didn't have before, and we mustn't forget that. This long consolidation happened at the previous all-time high, and that's exactly where we are now. Everyone is expecting lower prices. And that could be exactly the reason why, in the end, we don't go that low. We might go a bit lower, but not as far as everyone expects. And we start rising earlier because you'll have to buy Bitcoin at a higher price again. But that could be the scenario I see, a long consolidation which allows the RSI to recover significantly. One last leg down, but the RSI doesn't follow. And then we have a possible one here. A bullish divergence that we can use for the chart here, although it doesn't always play out. Of course, this is all very speculative about the future, but that's how I could imagine it if we really do see even lower prices. At the moment, everything points in that direction when we look at the indicator. All right, but that's enough about Bitcoin for now. You know my position, you know my buyback orders, and of course I'll keep you updated. Now let's move on to the liquidation heat map of the altcoins, which are super interesting. You had a few requests, so we'll start with XRP, but I'll go through this quickly so the video doesn't get too long. With XRP, on the 2-year liquidation heat map, this is how things look at the moment. We have an incredible amount of liquidity above us. This of course means that long-term holders or people who already believe and say we're buying now naturally have the chance in the medium to longer term future to easily reach prices of 3 to 4 US dollars. The liquidity here is super interesting. But if we now have a lag, then we see with Bitcoin, just as I told you, we have lower price possibilities. We have the bottom formation indicator. We have this liquidation here. We have institutional orders. Of course, we also have to consider what the altcoins will do in that case if we continue to go down. And our insight with XRP shows us that around 50 cents to 40 cents is super interesting. This is where the next major liquidation is waiting for us. That means if we go down, then with XRP, we are actually back in this bottom phase, the one we know from the past. And let's quickly go back to that. Those would be prices exactly in this area down here. So once again, down there where it has been consolidating for a long time. If it really comes to that, we will see. But for me, of course, it's an opportunity, and that's what I want to share with you. If you expect low prices or if some geopolitical world event happens and we drop significantly, at least I know for myself, I can place XRP orders at 50 to 40 cents, whether it's spot or long positions. But this insight is of course helpful to me now. Next coin. We're moving on to BNB. That also looks super interesting to me. BNB has actually been regularly neglected in the markets, so it hasn't been traded much. You could also see it in the volumes or liquidity. But at the moment, after 2 years of liquidation, we have a strong lag down. That's also the only thing we're seeing at the moment. Here, these 500 US dollars, roughly. So between those, this is the Fibonacci extension. Here we have the continuation, the trend following continuation. At the current point in time, it's probably not uninteresting, around 500 US dollars, this long consolidation phase that we had. And this again suggests, just like with Bitcoin, our last all-time highs. And here too, we have this long consolidation phase. And at the same time, we have target levels within this range. If we look at BNB here, this is the last major liquidity cluster that we have. From 500 to 450 US dollars, which is what we can see at least at the current time. So for me, BNB, also interesting to buy between 500 and 450 US dollars, or rather we see here that anything that goes below the 801, 479 would of course be super interesting. If we include the liquidation heat map, it's 483. That means exactly this last big cluster here is exciting. Let's continue. Which coin have I prepared next? And it looks so tempting, guys. Tron TRX on the 2-year liquidation heat map looks like this. So when you see something like this, then in my opinion, it's not an investment recommendation. Again, just my opinion, but it's super interesting that you can, for example, buy a spot position in this area in the range between 24 and 23 cents. And if it drops further, I can increase my entire spot position again and buy in the price range between 14 and 15 cents here. And if we look at this now, take a look at this. You know this from a Fibonacci technical perspective. If we take the last bear market low and look at it, what are the next ones? Fibonacci levels, meaning our high, our low here, where we entered here. So the 0.5 didn't hold, but the 0.618 was already an interesting zone. And right here in this area, there's now a massive amount again. Liquidity. And what do I mean by a massive amount of liquidity? From 0.24 down to about 0.22. So it's an interesting zone. And if we look at this on the chart, that's roughly where the 0.618 Fibonacci is. So for me, this is the first possible opportunity to buy Tron, and maybe even further down, you can see the second liquidation there. The heat map cluster I have here is right here, just before the 0.786. Tron, actually, if we look at it overall, has always been quite stable. And of course, what could also indicate a sell-off if we go in? We have overlapping Fibonacci levels here. If we go in already 0.681 and a bearish trend continuation means 0.618. As a bullish Fibonacci, I see this as a new spot buying opportunity for myself, and I will do that. Accordingly, I will also set an alert for myself when we reach these prices, so that I get a notification and can buy spot for myself. Let's continue. With the next coin Doge, I unfortunately have to say that we have no further insight downwards. There are some coins where we have no insight. Why is that? So I just want to show you very briefly. On the chart, because these lower prices were here from July 2022 to 2023 and our liquidation heat map. In this case, unfortunately, only goes back to 2024, so there's no way to see lower prices. If we were to include that, for example, and see lower prices, we would know roughly where a bottom could be. Based on the traded volume that we had here, let's continue with Link. You had the same question there. I should analyze Link. Of course, we see Link. If I zoom in a bit, take a close look at the liquidation heat map. Of course, we also have the price range opportunities later on. Up to $30 based on liquidity, but with Link, it's actually exactly the same. We can see that based on the prices that were at the bottom from 2022 to 2023, there's no way to get a deeper insight. That's why, unfortunately, I can't tell you any more about Link either. It's the same with AVAX. I don't need to analyze the chart again now. Unfortunately, the lower prices were before 2024. Then I also have Aptos, which was also your request. It's exactly the same. The low was simply much earlier. It was simply before 2024. At lower prices, unfortunately, I can't tell you anything either, but we see that ABT has price ranges up to $6, or rather just under $7, which are interesting, and later again up to $15. Then we also have here, which I looked up, NIR, that was also a request. At the moment, at least the $2, so a 100% increase from the current point. Super interesting. Take a look at it. It's so brightly lit that it's really interesting, but here it's the same story. NIR was simply much lower in the past, in 2023 and 2024, so among us there are no liquidations. Looking ahead, $8 to $9 is easily possible. And then there's Bitcoin Cash again. A lot of people, I don't know about you, let me know in the comments, a lot of people use Bitcoin Cash, but hardly for trading. But personally, I also see Bitcoin Cash as a super interesting opportunity again. If we drop down, we have great, strong liquidation zones at $376, or rather at $320. For me, therefore, in this case, it's also an opportunity where I would say spot purchases or building long positions that I will use for myself. We just must not forget, here at 250 something starts, but it's only a small cluster. And further below, we currently don't see anything. Despite everything, I see this as an opportunity where Bitcoin Cash has already been with nearly $700 in this bull run, that at price levels around $300, there are good chances to pick up a few spot buys here. Then we also have ADA. ADA is also super interesting for me, but as we can see, ADA is at its bottom. So we're here at the 2024 bottom, which lasted for a very long time. We're exactly there. At this point, there's not much more to analyze. For long-term holding, $1.23 is of course interesting again, but moving on. Unfortunately, I can't give you any information below that. Then I also have HBAR. HBAR is interesting to me. Why? If we do get another breakdown, I know HBAR will be an opportunity for me. I'll make this a bit brighter. The last liquidation clusters that we undertook during this consolidation in 2024 at around 0.048 cents. That's where I see the possibility that if we crash down, I might consider buying some spot positions here after all. Why is that so interesting? Take a look at the liquidity above. If I manage to get in here, even if it's just $1,000 or $100, depending on what someone has left in their budget, but just get in here. Place it, buy for spot, and then hold it long term, and also think long term, we can see everything that's above it. If I buy in at 0.048 and then it goes up to 0.35 or even higher, those are of course insane profits you can make. We're talking about preparing for a bear market bottom. That doesn't mean we can catch the bottom perfectly. No, we can only try to analyze as best as possible with level 2 data what exactly we're aiming for. Otherwise, that's it for this video. If any of you have coin requests you'd like me to go through because you don't want to treat yourself to the Prime subscription, that's no problem at all. I'm happy to analyze that for you because maybe together we'll find one or another coin that shows us something similar, like for example Bitcoin Cash is showing us, or Tron, where I see something like that. Then I'm also willing to place spot buys there for myself because I simply see that as an opportunity, and then from a long-term technical perspective. Because we know that in a bull market we have to be patient, but if we can get in at the lowest possible prices and then hold long term, that will be super interesting. Thank you so much for your support and see you next time.